I'm a full-time landscape photographer since 2009, and over time I developed my own style when photographing forests and especially foggy forests. Hey everyone, my name is Toma, Phototom here on YouTube. I'm a full-time landscape photographer and I'm most well known for my foggy forests. So I'll just start with this photo, and the settings are 35mm focal length, f8 0.4 seconds, and ISO 100. The reason I went to the forest in that day was because I saw there was hoarfrost on the branches of the trees. I also knew that it was only the beginning of winter, so there was a thick layer of leaves on the ground. All these leaves were dark brownish leaves, but if you change the hue a little bit of dark brown, you will end up with red. And then if you make the hoarfrost or the snow or the fog a little bit, you shift it a little bit towards blue, you get a really nice and beautiful contrast. And as you can see, I like clean forests. I like working with forests that I can see the floor of the forest, I can have a clear trail, and I'm having the trees on the edges as guardians, and these trees are guiding the viewer into the photo. For this next photo, I used the 25mm focal length, again f8, 0.6 seconds, and ISO 100. And the reason for which I took this photo was I really liked that group of trees. It almost looks like four brothers that are grown together, and they form a really beautiful subject that you can photograph. Now, if there wasn't fog in the forest, probably I would have needed to use a longer focal length and stay on a bigger distance from these trees if I wanted to separate these trees from the rest of the forest. But this is the beauty when photographing the forest in a foggy day. The fog helps you separate the subject from the background, and you create depth, but you also put the subject in a better perspective, and you present the subject a lot easier. So the persons or the people that are watching your photos know exactly what the subject is. This next image is a composite, so I can't really talk about settings when it comes to this photo. So the process of creating this photo was something like this. First of all, I took the camera and placed it on my chest, and I kept running and did some of these kind of motions while I was running. And this is the swirling, moving world that you see behind the tree. And then I took the photo that resulted, shifted the hue a little bit to make the leaves red, and duplicated the photo and flip it on horizontal, and created an image, the background image. After that, I searched for a small tree, and because the tree was really small, I was able to photograph it and have the dark brownish leaves in the background, which of course I shifted to red, and this made the compositing of these of the photo of the tree and the background really easy. The fourth photo has a really interesting name, and I call this Where Fairies Live, and I used a focal length of 80mm, f11, 1 second exposure, and ISO 100. Funny thing is that I remember exactly where this photo was taken, and over time I photographed that place over and over again. I edited differently, but the photo that stuck to me was this one, and this actually was the first time when I photographed that place. Now this place is, you can see it from the trail, but you can't get near to it and photograph it because there's an area of thick vegetation, and if you get there, you don't actually see the composition. So I photographed it from the place where I was sitting. That's why I used a longer focal length, and because I used the longer focal length, I also closed the aperture to f11 to make sure everything is in focus. The editing took into consideration that there was darkness around the area of light, and I accentuated and increased the contrast between these two areas. And I also shifted the colors and I created a color contrast, not only a luminosity contrast, but also color contrast between these two areas. And this way you get almost like a gateway to a magical world. Now let's move to photo number 5, which was photographed with a 24mm focal length, f11, 1.3 seconds, and ISO 100. Again, this is a tree that I photographed a lot over time, and over there the trail kind of descends a little bit, and after that it goes up. The big plus is that the tree is right in the beginning of the slope going up, and it also has 3 other trees on the left side. So I can position myself in a way that I can have a really interesting background. And if I'm photographing, for example, from far away with a longer focal length, then I can have only the forest as background, and I can eliminate the sky from the photo. It wasn't this case in the day when I photographed, when I took this photo, because it was really foggy, but the fog was also lit up by the light that was above the forest. And very often when there's fog inside the forest, the fog is there because of the atmospheric conditions inside the forest, but usually above the forest at 25 or 50 meters, I found out that the fog in some situations dissipate. It's not always the case. Sometimes I raise the drone even 150 meters and I start losing signal and there is still fog. So it depends from one situation to another, but it was the case in that day to have the layer of fog not that thick, and the light was getting kind of through the fog and was creating this really surreal atmosphere when you look at the forest and you kind of see the light coming from above. This is another tree that I really like, and for this tree I used a 45mm focal length, f8, 1 second, and ISO 100. The reason for which I keep photographing this tree is because that's the tree that gets yellow before all the other trees that are around it. I don't know exactly why it's happening, but it's happening. So I'm always trying to pay attention to this when autumn arrives, because as you can see, the trees behind it are having their leaves green, and this tree is already yellow. So it's a very nice contrast, and I think this is a very pleasant image to look at. It's almost like this is one tree that is different from all the other trees. Whenever there is thick fog in the forest, I have an area where I like to go, because I found out that over there's a little bit of light going into the forest. And for this photo, I used the 47mm focal length, f11, 0.8 seconds, and ISO 100. And because in this area there is still light coming into the forest, the trees become in silhouette. So when I'm photographing in that direction, basically I'm looking into the light, into the sun. The sun is not, of course, directly shining on me, but is on that horizon curve in that direction. So it's very easy to have this feeling of layering, because you have the closer trees, the trees that are closer to you and are also inside the forest a lot more. These trees become silhouettes, and then the rest of the trees are getting closer and closer to the edge of the forest, and they benefit from the light that comes out from the forest and shines in. And this adds a little bit of texture, and you get a better visibility on the leaves of those trees, because the light goes through the leaves and you kind of see the texture, and because of that you also start to see the colors. And whenever this is happening, I'm just there in that position. So if I'm entering the forest and the fog is really thick, I'm heading to this place and I'm photographing in that direction, because I know for sure that the photo is going to look interesting. This is another moody photo that I like a lot, and the focal length that I used for this was 50mm, and the settings were f11, 1.4 seconds and ISO 100. Whenever I post this photo, it gets almost 1,000 likes, or on Facebook, and on Instagram 2,000 likes or something like that. So it's a photo that I think fits into something. I don't know exactly the reason for which some photos get all that attention and others are not. Of course, that the first thing that you have to get over it's the algorithm. The algorithm has to decide that this is an interesting enough photo to present it to your viewer. So this is another conversation. But whenever I'm using this photo, it has success. People like this photo, and I decided to go with muted greens for this photo. You can see it's a little bit desaturated, it's moody, and it has a dark feel attached to it. I don't always want to create photos with my foggy forest that are dark and moody and spooky or creepy, but for this case, I think it worked really, really well. So I think it was a good decision to go with that, and that is a tip or a piece of advice that I have for you. Just try to experiment with the way you are editing your photos. Try to find your own style. It's very, I don't know if you can just, okay, he told me to find my own style, and how do I do that? I have a course about this on Skillshare, so if you're interested in this course, I will leave a link in the description of this video, how to find your own style. But this happens over time. This happens in a way, it has to be natural. If you start to copy the way other people are editing, it's a good way to start, but it's not a good thing to keep on doing for a longer period of time. You need to be you in your photos. And now let's talk about photo number 9. And I have 50mm focal length, f11, 1/10 of a second, and ISO 100. And it's again about that tree that gets its yellow leaves before all the other trees. The difference is that right now I have a little bit of light coming from my left, and I've accentuated that. I made it, I increased the contrast, and I have a really powerful sense of light coming from the left, and I made that light a little bit blue. And with the tree that has the leaves yellow, I think the contrast is really interesting. It looks really, really well. And the final photo in my top 10 is this one, which is a winter foggy forest. And the settings are f8, 1/20th of a second, ISO 100, and 50mm focal length. As you can see, 50mm focal length, the focal length of 50mm appears a lot in my photos. It's not something that I'm doing on purpose. I'm using a 24-1 or 5mm lens, so I guess the 50mm just happens. The reason for which I included this photo is because I like the snow. It's almost like pristine snow. No one has stepped on it. It's fresh snow. And then I have this tree, which has the dark brownish leaves on it. And I can play a little bit with the hue, and I can change them towards red, and then you have a really, I mean, that's the biggest contrast that you can get. Red leaves on white snow. So yeah, these were my top 10 favorite photos, personal photos of foggy forests. And I hope you like the photos. I hope that you've learned something from this video. I know sometimes I talk a lot, but it's just the way I am. So if you want to support me, you can buy my landscape photography ebook, where I talk about landscape photography and I present different topics through examples. You can also buy one of my editing courses, or you can join me for one of my workshops, and all the details are for all this are in the description of this video on my website. Now, consider subscribing if you're not subscribed already. Share this video with your friends. Leave a comment if you have something to add. And until next time, keep on photographing, because it's the only way that you can get better. Bye-bye.